Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 14 of Echoes of Curiosity. Thank you for being here. I'll admit I'm a bit anxious about sharing the following details. It's not because I'm ashamed or fearful, but because I'm going to tell you about a part of my life that separated me into two halves. It recounts a time when there was a before and after Thomas. And the before often went by the name Tommy. Because at the time, that's what I preferred. Tommy was the version of me who was still trying to figure out where he belonged. He was hopeful. He was also insecure, extremely insecure. But he was eager, and he was searching, always curious. He wanted to be seen, but he didn't quite know how to see himself. I look back on him now with a real tenderness, because I realized that he was doing the best he could. He was doing the best he could with what he knew. In the latter half of 1992, something utterly amazing happened to me. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely good about my body. This was huge. In my teenage years and all through high school, I suffered with chronic eczema, and it would flare up and cause me all kinds of irritation and pain, and it was very visible at times. And in addition to that, I had acne like many teenagers, and I was extremely self-conscious about that as well. By the time I got to I guess I still had acne all through my 20s, but by the time I got to, who am I kidding? I had acne up through my 50s, but it just wasn't as bad. But in my early 20s, it shifted. It was more about, I felt like I was too skinny. I didn't have any muscle to speak of. And until I was 21, I was still wearing glasses, and I hadn't yet gotten contact lenses. But these glasses were, they were what they used to refer to as Coke bottle glasses. They were very, very thick. And I was always comparing myself. I was constantly comparing myself. I really tortured myself with that. As I look back on that, I have great compassion for this version of myself. And I also had a really large collection of baseball caps because I never liked my hair, so it was always the baseball cap covering up my hair, when it wouldn't cooperate. I never liked my hair. Isn't that interesting? It was like I was always trying to cover something. I was always trying to cover something or distract from something. Well, there I was at 27, though, and I was still living in Texas on my own, and I felt good. I felt attractive and confident for the first time in my life. I felt like I finally belonged in my own skin. It was brief, but it was real. It was a moment of emergence, and I'd never known it before. Around this time, I had recently ended a 4-year relationship with a man who was 10 years my senior. We separated amicably and convivially. um, it was it was difficult, but it was necessary. I think we both recognized that we changed in ways that no longer served a partnership. But the important thing is that a friendship endured, and I'm still friends with Michael to this day. That relationship taught me stability and kindness, and basically also it taught me how to be in a partnership. And its ending, I think, taught me how to step into myself again. The world around me seemed to rise right along with me. Uh, just to get a picture of things in the early 90s, gay clubs in the early 90s were vibrant. They were vibrant and they were crowded and just alive. They were, I think the most suitable word would be sanctuaries. They were sanctuaries where men and women could breathe and express themselves, and also where they could feel a sense of belonging that didn't always exist outside those doors, especially in north central Texas, in the city of Fort Worth particularly. That's where I lived. I can remember the music, the pounding, pulsing, unapologetic music. And it was fun. Dancing was a lot of fun. The lights, those lights that washed over everyone like a blessing. The way people moved, they moved freely and joyfully. They were moving on those dance floors with no fear. I would go out and I would dance, and I would feel like I was seen, and I felt like I was part of something. So it's like my new confidence had a place to live. And every once in a while I'd drive over to Dallas if I felt like the longer trek was worth it. Dallas definitely had a different energy. It was bigger and bolder and a little more glamorous, I guess you could say. It felt like stepping into a larger world, a larger gay world. Actually had a gayborhood, Cedar Springs, for those of you who know. This was also a time when I began the most promising career of my young life, my so far young life. I had worked for years in retail management, in mostly men's clothing, and I suddenly found myself in a multi-story office building, wearing sharp clothes and ties and carrying a briefcase that I probably didn't need. But I walked into that job in customer relations. It felt like a real career. Yeah. It was the first time I felt like I truly landed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into adulthood with purpose and a sense of I'm ready to conquer the world. I can't express in sufficient words what a new experience this was for me. I had been down on myself for so long. Every morning at this new juncture in my life, it felt like a fresh start. Every elevator ride felt like possibility. All those meetings, all those new people, professionals. And I felt like I had arrived. The national landscape at that time was shifting too. Bill Clinton had been elected president later in the year, in that November, and for many of us in the gay community, he truly represented progress. there was just a kind of a promise in the air that life might get better for us. And earlier in the year, there'd been lots of hopeful signs for people who were living with AIDS. There was a new kind of activism, I guess, and that activism really made a difference when it came to some medical achievements and new treatments and just research that was being done. And I I think there was a sense that the community was mobilizing around this. People were fighting and people were surviving. I I wanted to be part of that hope. So I began volunteering at a resource center and I became a buddy to a couple of men living with the disease. These men, they they reminded me of how fortunate I was. And they also reminded me of how fragile life was and how much our community needed one another. Sitting with them, listening to them, and laughing with them, that changed me a lot and it grounded me. You know, on one hand, I was feeling great about myself, and on the other hand, I was sometimes incredibly sad for what the community was experiencing. And it made me feel, I don't know, it made me aware of how interconnected we all were. And this was also the time I began getting tested for HIV. And that was something people could finally do. And each time those those results came back negative, I would breathe a sigh of relief. And I was grateful. I was extremely grateful. So in the middle of all that hope, the new job, the clubs, the activism, the feeling of finally belonging in my own skin, I met someone. I won't name him, but I can say this. He was good looking and he knew it. This was the kind of man who drew attention wherever he went. From men, from women, from anyone who noticed beauty. And I really think that's probably the appropriate word here. He was a beautiful man, physically speaking. So for the first time in my life, someone that I found deeply attractive was telling me that I was attractive. This was huge for Thomas at 27. It was intoxicating. And it was validating. It was everything my fragile new confidence wanted to hear. But it also brought my insecurities to the surface. I was jealous and I was unsure. I was suddenly aware of every man who looked at this man with desire, and it tortured me in many ways. But his attention was there and it made me feel seen. And at the same time, it made me feel vulnerable. It was the beginning of a whirlwind, literally a whirlwind of passion that lifted me out of the funk that I had been in, and it exposed parts of me that I didn't quite know how to hold. And those parts of me that so desperately wanted validation, they began to pull me toward choices that I wouldn't have made in any other season of my life. And this is where episode 14 ends. Not with a cliffhanger. No, I guess this is more like a little earthquake, a tremor, a sense that something is beginning to move just below the surface. A what comes next moment. But it opens the door to the next chapter of my life, where all of that confidence I had just discovered would be tested, and where my life separated into parts 1, part 2. Thank you for walking with me through this chapter. I'll meet you in the next one. Please stay curious.